Your domain can pass every authentication check Google publishes and still land in spam. I've watched it happen to accounts that did everything the tutorial said. That's because deliverability quietly stopped being a checklist and most advice never caught up. Here's the number that reset my thinking. Since Gmail's February 2024 enforcement update, spam complaint rate is kept at 0.3% for anyone sending real volume. Not a target, a ceiling. Cross it and you don't get filtered into spam. You get rejected outright. No delivery at all. For years, the model was set up SPF, set up DKIM, add DMARC, you're authenticated, you're safe. That model came from a real place. Authentication is mandatory now. But mandatory isn't the same as sufficient, and treating it as the finish line is the mistake I still see agencies make. A few years ago, what killed the campaign was mostly content. Spammy words, weird formatting, too many links, fixable with a rewrite. What kills a campaign now is behavior. Microsoft evaluates a composite score: domain age, sending history, recipient engagement, not just whether your headers check out. A domain that passes SPF and DKIM cleanly, but has zero sending history, still gets junked, because there's no history to score. You can't rewrite your way out of a reputation you haven't built yet. That's the part nobody puts in the setup guide. Authentication gets you evaluated, it doesn't get you trusted. Domain age plays into that same scoring. And it's not soft advice, it's a mechanism. A domain under roughly 30 days old gets extra scrutiny at Outlook specifically, independent of how clean your DNS records are. I've seen teams register a domain and start sending inside a week because the authentication was done, and then wonder why open rate sat at half of what a domain twice its age was getting with the identical setup. The records were never the gap, the history was. The safe sending ceiling has been shrinking, and it isn't going back up. The operational safe volume for a single warmed inbox currently sits around 30 to 50 cents a day. It used to be meaningfully higher. Every year, the mailbox providers get better at spotting volume patterns, and every year, the number that feels safe gets a little more conservative. If you're planning campaigns around a number you read a year ago, plan for it to be lower now. Here's the correction most setups get wrong. Having SPF and DKIM configured but skipping DMARC, or leaving it at its default monitoring-only setting, produces 15 to 25% lower inbox placement than full alignment. Not a rounding error. A quarter of your placement gone because of one record most people treat as optional. One operator put a real number on it. 6 months of SPF and DKIM configured correctly, still landing in spam, added DMARC with full enforcement. Inbox placement went from 55% to 91% in 2 weeks. Nothing else changed. That's not a tutorial stat, that's what happens when the record everyone skips actually gets turned on. So here's what I actually check, in order, when a domain isn't landing. First, alignment, not just presence. SPF and DKIM can both individually pass while the visible sender address doesn't match either. DMARC is the only record that catches that. If it's not fully enforced, you're leaving placement on the table even with everything set up. Second, domain history. A brand new domain with perfect authentication still reads as unproven. There's no shortcut here. The reputation has to be built before the volume arrives, not during it. Third, complaint rate, tracked weekly, not glanced at once. It's the one signal that degrades fastest and recovers slowest. By the time you notice reply rates dropping, the complaint spike usually happened days earlier. Most deliverability problems trace back to one of these three, and it's rarely the one people assume. Notice none of these are at this DNS record. They're the things a checklist can't fix because they're built over weeks, not configured in an afternoon. Here's how I'd actually run this. I don't touch a domain until it's provisioned through Informal because the authentication gets configured correctly at setup instead of by hand. That removes the alignment mistakes entirely. Instantly handles the actual warm-up and keeps sending volume where the current benchmarks say it should be, not where it was 2 years ago. And none of that matters if the list behind it is bad. A bounce-heavy list from an unverified source is what drives the complaint rate up in the first place, so the contacts come from Quarvio, verified before they're ever sent to. AimFox runs in parallel on LinkedIn because that channel doesn't touch your email domain's reputation at all. None of this is a hack. It's just building the reputation before you need it, instead of trying to explain it away after.